favorite procurement nerds are back today. And Dr. Elouise, I think you mentioned you were watching some interesting stuff. So let's have you throw that in real time.
Well, look, first off, it's a freezing day here in the Bay Area. I don't know how cold it is out there, but oh my gosh, in Oakland, I'm freezing right now. So
Yeah,
I'm,
it's pretty chilly. I'm in a like warm, fuzzy sweatshirt right now.
yeah, it looks comfortable. Um, and by the way, I just want to do a self-congratulations to both of us. We just passed 50 episodes, so hooray for us! I just will say again, thank you for being my partner on this. I've so enjoyed doing this, and especially as we found our footing in more recent episodes. Not to say we hadn't before, but I really love some of our more recent episodes around data centers and fire trucks and dominoes. So this has just been like such an exciting and fantastic time. So congratulations on 50 and thank you.
Yeah, congrats to you. And I totally failed us in our intro for the episode. I didn't even mention it. It's in, if you read in the notes, we talk about it, but that was an absolute miss on my part. I should have had
Yeah.
a sign or some balloons or something in the house to celebrate.
It's all good. And so today we're going to talk about AI and consulting and sort of it's changing and how it's changing or what we think it'll be like. And I was, funny enough, just finished a video on from a channel called More Perfect Union, and they were studying there are now long haul trucks piloting autonomous driving. So for autonomous using autonomous trucks to move cargo across stretches of I-45 in Texas, and it was just super fascinating. And it's really because truck driving is one of the most it can be a very lucrative and certainly very common job here in the US, and AI is on the verge of really taking over that, and that's not a new development, but anyway, just I thought it was apropos that I randomly was watching that thanks to the
Mhm.
YouTube algorithm, and really just it's not just the trucking and warehouse work and whatnot, but also it is definitely changing the AI, the consulting market. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so I was very excited to share that video.
Yeah, and the kind of the inspiration came from I didn't realize like I actually have a lot of friends that are in consulting. When I really sat down and thought about it, whether there's someone like you working for, a large firm, but I have a lot of friends that also either work for smaller consulting firms or have gone it on their own and do consulting. And something that's come up in conversations over the last couple months in particular when I've been talking to them is around how their world is changing with AI, specifically as it relates to being a consultant in the procurement and supply chain space. So, because it's come up so many times, I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking maybe we should talk about this. And you, Dr. Elouise, I think in particular, have kind of a unique perspective since you've been doing this for 25 plus years. Am I saying that correctly?
Just about. And in fact, teaser, we'll have an episode just in 2 weeks, I think it is, celebrating that and talking about my journey specifically in Carney. And so this will be a nice bookend. This episode will be a bookend to that episode.
Yeah. So what I thought would be kind of interesting today is we'll kind of talk through and I've got some questions prepared. But really kind of getting your perspective as someone who's living and breathing the consultant life as to what you're seeing around like the impact of AI. And I want to say that I don't think it's all bad. Like sometimes there's a tendency to think, AI is taking every job. We're going to have no consultants in the next 2 years. And I've actually seen some useful and interesting use cases around how consultants are using AI in a positive way. So I don't want this to come across as this is going to be a bash and how terrible. I think there's some really good things too.
Yeah, and I like that because I don't view it as bad. I mean,
Yeah.
I was reflecting last night that I had spent almost the entirety of yesterday using various AI tools just to do my research on my next book. And I realized at one point I had like 12 windows of different, like various versions, or not versions, but various windows of, I had Notebook LM over here and OpenAI over here, or ChatGPT, and like all this stuff. And I was like, this is chaos. Anyway, so it's not all bad, but it's just different.
Yeah. So I want to start with a quote that I found, and I don't I honestly even remember who said it or where I read it, but it's something that I just randomly take notes as I find interesting things. And it is, AI isn't taking your job, it's taking away the parts of your job that you used to learn on.
Yes.
And so I thought that would be an interesting place to start. And I almost call it like the shrinking bottom of the
Yeah.
pyramid, meaning there are fewer, from what I've seen as an outsider who has spent a lot of her career in the procurement and supply chain space. I'm seeing less junior consultant roles, those types of things. Not, I just don't see job postings, I don't hear about those as much. So I think from my perspective, we're already starting to see less junior roles, again shrinking that bottom of the period. And then what that means is you're hiring fewer analysts. I mean, I think a lot of those are kind of analyst roles, but the folks that are getting hired have high AI fluency or high adaptability to learn AI skills quickly. So it's just
Mhm.
kind of an observation that I'm throwing out there as someone who's not a consultant.
And I think we need to level set because the pyramid. So when you enter consulting, let's say you come out of school, like if there's 10 analysts at the bottom of the pyramid, then there's going to be, I don't know, the math doesn't work, so please forgive me, but the 10 analysts, five associates, three managers, two principals, one partner. And it's designed so that one partner is expensive and top, and hopefully you have this balanced pyramid. Because if you have a top heavy pyramid, what you have is a lot of partners that cost a lot of money and not a lot of people beneath you uh, out there making money. And so the traditional pyramid is, if you're an analyst, and it's up or out. And so the model is not every analyst is going to make partner, not every associate is going to make partner, not every manager is going to make partner. And so it's that thing of look around, because as you matriculate up the pyramid, more and more folks fall off and go back to industry and do other things, go to tech and whatnot. And that is the life cycle. And what you highlighted there is exactly right. The reason that you matriculate up the pyramid is because that's how you learn. That's how you learn to do the structured thinking, the logical designs, the communication skills, the presentation skills, et cetera, et cetera. So, and somebody, I was just talking to another partner this morning, like if AI is going to eliminate the guild way of operating where you apprentice essentially your way up the pyramid, and most of what the junior folks do at the bottom of the pyramid, which is analysis and building decks and whatnot, doing interviews, like AI is just completely undercutting that. So yes, I love that quote because yeah, that's what's happening.
So what I've also seen from, again, interacting with so many friends that are consultants, or friends that I have that are pretty senior up at organizations that work with consultants in some way, is I kind of summarized four skills that I'm seeing that are kind of must have skills for consultants, and especially if they're newer, like within the first 5 or 6 years of your career, or you're trying to get into consulting and procurement and supply chain. Prompt engineering, and I think this just goes for anyone in life. At some point, you're going to need to use AI and you need to know how to ask the right questions. But in particular, in consulting, if you don't ask the right question and it spits out bad data, and then you build a whole model and foundation around it and it's wrong, it can be a disaster.
Yep.
You've got to figure that out. The second is AI tool proficiency. And that's just having the propensity to identify tools and quickly learn how to use them. And for me, incorporating them into your life, right? It's easy to figure something out and then kind of put it on a shelf and it goes away, but figuring out what you can actually incorporate and use on a more regular basis. The third is interpretation and decision making. So AI is going to spit out all this really smart sounding stuff. I
It's good
call
at that.
it I call it the first 80%. So it does the groundwork. It makes it so you're not staring at a blank screen. But you've got to be able to have a brain and apply your intelligence and strategic thinking to it to tweak it to get that last 20% in the right place to be presentable. And the fourth must have skill is soft skills. And I think this is just becoming so important. It's often hard to really gauge when you're in the interview process, being able to understand if somebody's emotionally intelligent, is able to build relationships with clients. And I would argue, I think one of the most important soft skills in 2025 is the power of storytelling.
Hmm.
And this used to be something that was just like associated with marketing. Oh, you're in marketing, you need to be able to tell the story, you need to be able to write powerful content. But it is not just marketing. You need to be able to tell a story in a compelling way. And I think that's really important for consultants. So those are my kind of top four skill list. Dr. Elouise, is there anything that I've missed that you're seeing as like, wow, consultants just absolutely have to have this skill in 2025?
Well, what's funny about your list is I think it applies to everybody. I don't think it's unique to consulting because, especially that soft skill, like we're all going to become proficient at prompt engineering. It's just new for a lot of us. And so it's just going to take time, and making use of AI tools and the like. We're going like those will happen. It's the soft skills that have oftentimes defined consultants, but we absolutely need them to be front and center. And so I have a whole slide in my presentations where I talk about the soft skills because they're harder to find in the hiring process, but they're the most important. And I think it's true for every job. And the other thing I would add is the 80% brain, like that last 20% is where the humans are really important. And sort of related that and the relationship management that you talked about, or developing relationships, staying connected. I always say that we are humans living in a physical world, and no matter how much AI we throw at this, we are still humans in a physical world, and relationships matter. So if you're over 40 and struggling to learn prompt engineering and struggling to use all these newfangled AI tools, you'll get there. But also remember, you have really strong relationship skills because many of us grew up with at a time without computers, and that was that we had to learn. We had nothing else. We developed relationships. So yeah, I don't think I would add anything more than just that context on what the four that you mentioned.
So, building on that, then, what are you seeing as emerging roles or career models in consulting? Have you noticed any major changes in job titles or, just different types of hiring that's being done in consulting?
Yeah, and so I want to be careful. I'm going to speak to the consulting market, not Carney in particular, because I think I've mentioned there's a social network for consultants called Fishbowl. And so what I'm going to reflect back on this question or in my answer here is more broadly what I've seen, not just or talking to folks at other firms, not Carney. So I just want to make sure I want to clarify I'm not representing Carney, but I think I have not seen new job titles and I have not seen new job descriptions. And I think what we're getting at, this might be more of a wide wandering response, but I think the entire consulting model is getting turned on its head. And I don't think we've seen those new roles develop. And I'm not sure we're going to see them in the legacy firms. And so there's an influencer on LinkedIn that I watch. I read his stuff. It comes out almost every day, and I just love it. His name's Usman Sheikh. I'm sure I mispronounced that, but anyway, we'll put a link to his stuff in the show notes, and he really talks about that legacy consulting, meaning the McKinseys, BCGs, Bains, and the Big Four, the Accentures, KPMGs, and Deloitte of the world, are are stuck in this old model. And he spends a lot of time talking about that consulting is getting disrupted, and both private equity and venture capital have new theses and on the consulting market, and they are putting their money where their ideas are and investing in alternative consulting firms slash models, because the bet is that the traditional firms aren't going to move fast enough to embrace this transition, because it at the core it's you're basically disrupting the status quo for something that's new.
Mhm. So, two roles that I've heard in the last couple months, and I think they're quite interesting, consulting and non-consulting related. I think they apply to people who aren't also necessarily in consulting. But the first is model auditor.
Mm.
And this is someone that reduces bias and ensures compliance. And the second role is strategy translator. So this is someone who bridges kind of that balance between the technical and the business teams. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious to see if those two in particular are something that we really see play out in the consulting world.
Well, that second one, it's taken on various names over the last 20 years, 20 plus years. Is oftentimes it's an architect, and I wrote about this guy named so at Vodafone at the time there was a gentleman by the name of Sabi Rosales, and I interviewed him, and because he was the architect for Vodafone and he had this amazing he to me he just exemplified this ability to understand the business and translate it to the technical. And I was watching some of their meetings. I sat in on some of their meetings when I was doing my research, and that translator that can take the business that the so understands the business pain points and translates it to the technical. I think that role just evolves and maybe expands, because you sort of use that example of you can just use AI to come up with 80%. Well, that last bit is, how do I take that 80% and translate it into make it actionable and relevant? So I always come back to my work is I asked Notebook LM to create a outline for an academic article, and my job was to translate that. Like, what it came up with was 80% there. I loved it. It was great. But I also had to go back and figure out what was missing, and maybe to that first job, also audit to make sure everything that
Yeah.
was being brought out was actually legitimate.
And then I think the other important piece there is having your own perspective and your own opinion.
Yes.
So here's all the data. Here's my interpretation of it. And here's why I think this matters. And that is where the human element can come in.
And it's so like that right there. I mean, that's it. That at least for the short and midterm is being in the middle of that versus like I think Hollywood's done a great job of conveying that AI is this all-knowing, all-powerful being. And maybe we'll get there, but right now, the reality is AI is powerful, but it's a powerful tool in a small box. There might be many small boxes, but the humans really need to understand that these are just small boxes, and here's how we use them or don't use them.
Mhm. So, question for you, advice for consultants that are working in supply chain and procurement right now. And let's say they're early or mid-career, not someone who's, at your level that's 20 plus years, but someone that's a little bit more junior. What should they be doing either to decide, hey, maybe I don't want to continue this career path and that's okay, or if I do want to stay being a consultant, how am I going to survive? Like, what do I need to do?
That's a tough question, but believe it or not, because at that level, like for me, I can see the relative end of my career, or sort of like I can see the sun setting in my career. Now, maybe that's 10 years, maybe that's 15 years, but I don't have 20 plus years to go. And I think the people you just described have at least 20 years to
Yeah.
go. And I'm concerned that everything we know about business, much less consulting, is going to fundamentally change. So I don't really have a good answer other than I would really lean into the AI now and get ahead of it, even if that takes you out of consulting, because I'm not convinced that procurement and supply chain consulting, well, it'll always be there. It's definitely, I don't believe, going to be a growth market on the long term, because much of much of procurement supply chain consulting is a little bit, it's these are rough numbers. I don't have the actual numbers, but it's like it's half business process outsourcing, whether it's logistics on a 3PL or third party logistics, or it's you're offshoring procurement operations to an Accenture or Deloitte or Genpact. So you have that kind of work, or you have just more traditional come in and the organization is not doing procurement well. So we're going to bring a lot of very smart people and jumpstart the sourcing slash procurement operations. But those to me are like those jobs are all going to shrink or at least be capped in the amount of like runway there is for that, or profit margin, shall we say? Because in my entirety of my career, I have seen lots of money being made either outsourcing, running those outsourcing, just helping decide the outsourcing, or what was the other, whatever the other, oh, running sourcing events. And I think over time, those things are not going to exist. So what is left over is sort of op model design, skill uplift, digital AI. But I don't know that those are high growth consulting. So to, that was a long-winded answer. I'm not sure what those younger folks in this profession. I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see less and less interest. I think we talked about this on an episode last year. We were talking about consulting, but I think we're going to see less younger people even being interested in consulting.
Yeah, we are already seeing that, and Usman made an interesting. He had a point that the pyramid is designed for ambitious graduates that want to sacrifice everything to make it to partner, and now uh, Gen Z sees consulting, those that actually go into it, as a temporary, not career long. Um, there's also greater competition because you have investment banking, you have private equity, you have these other high performance career paths, and a small percentage only want to really make it to partner. And we've seen this pretty much since 2020. It has nothing to do with pandemic. It just seemed like it really hit then, is that the younger folks are not the best and brightest aren't always going to consulting, whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, they always went to consulting. Well, consulting first meant now there's way more options, and there's a rejection of, I don't want to work 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And I'm not saying that's healthy or we should be promoting that, but when I started, that was a given. Like nobody batted an eyelash, and now you're getting a lot of pushback.
And people, I think, are not as open to being on the road 5 or
Yes.
6 days a week, which is very wearing on your health.
Or even in the office. I mean, this whole return to office has hit consulting firms as well, because why should I go to the office just to sit on Teams calls all day? And yeah, and also one of the things that was great historically about consulting is there was camaraderie, because you would fly to, I don't know, Des Moines, Iowa, or Midland, Michigan, and you'd kind of be a captive audience in a small town, and you would develop friendships and sort of, remember when we got in that car and had to drive through that snowstorm? There was a camaraderie, and now some clients don't want you on site, or a much smaller profile, and so you're not developing those social bonds that kind of make there's that term, embrace the suck. Well, oftentimes there's camaraderie that builds when you're embracing the suck, and I'm not sure how I came up with, or how that popped into my head, but essentially, like the social aspect of consulting is also going. So then it's like, why am I sitting in front of my screen 16 hours a day, laboring for something that has no intrinsic value to me?
Yeah. So then, kind of a reverse question there. Let's say I'm working for a firm that is looking to hire a consultant this year, right? Whether it's a larger agency or kind of a small individual contributor. What things should I be asking and looking for to make sure that the person that we're going to be working with has a sense and understands AI, right? If I were hiring somebody tomorrow, it would be really important to me that they were aware of what tools are available and that they knew how to use them and they were incorporating them into their work. But how do we ask and interview, because often the people that you talk to aren't people that are assigned to your account, depending on the size of the firm.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the greatest. You and I both know this, right? We've seen a lot of quote unquote AI nonsense for the past 7, 8 years. Everybody just comes in spewing throwing these terms around, like, anyway.
Oh, where I'm
Well,
AI first, I'm AI forward, AI
yeah,
everything. Yes.
yeah. I mean, that was on the video. I'm just shaking my head. It's like it's so painful. So there is a lot of nonsense out there, and so it becomes this de facto or reflexive. Okay, I'm interviewing for this job. I better say AI 400 times in the course of 1 hour. But I think ultimately, with so many things, you have to show, not tell. And back to your point about storytelling, what is it that I've learned? How am I using it? And there's a great clip. I can always keep referencing this, where on LinkedIn you see this person interviewing over Zoom, and in the background the guy has chat GPT running and listening to and giving answers.
Which happens quite a bit more than we probably care to even think.
Right. And so part of me thinks that from a storytelling point of view, you almost want to acknowledge, like, whenever I make a mistake, I like to acknowledge it. And I feel like getting through part of the interview and then say, well, I have an AI agent here running, telling me all the things, and sort of shining the light on it instead of pretending, and then really using that as a departure point to show my proficiency with AI. To me, that's a winner right there. And And there are, I mean, and this gets to your point, who's interviewing these people? Because there, you have to have a very precise eye and understanding of what this nonsense is. And I have one of these slides that I use in my presentations where it's an architecture slide and there's an agentic layer, slapped on top of SaaS and transactional systems and whatever else. And I said, if you see something like this is a telltale sign that the person doesn't actually know what agentic is because they're not thinking about it properly. And so you need people that critical eye to, and my job is to educate people. So you need that critical eye to say, ah, that person doesn't really know what they're talking about because they're just spewing what everybody else posts on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and one of the things that I haven't interviewed anyone super recently, but I think if I were interviewing for a consultant, I wanted to make sure that they were I'll call it AI forward, at the risk of sounding too buzzwordy, um, is asking where do you go to get your AI information, and what's something in the last week that you've learned that's interesting about AI. And people who are really into AI will have newsletters and podcasts, and they'll be able to kind of quickly spew off where they're going for their news sources. So that can kind of be a good vetting tool, I think.
Yep.
Then even just asking, what's your AI tool of choice, and tell me the last projects that you used it for. I
Yep.
mean, just kind of have someone kind of walk through. And if you don't use AI regularly, you're going to kind of fumble around. And I think it will be pretty apparent that this person maybe doesn't use AI as much as they may say.
Yes, love that answer. And yes, everybody should use you to interview people. Gosh, that was really good. I like that. I like that a lot.
Because we can't always expect that we're going to ask people to spend 5 hours building a project for us, right? So, but you can have people pull on existing things that they've done as a way to speak to their AI abilities and AI intelligence.
Well, and also getting back to that storytelling, I mean, I did it here earlier on this recording where I talked about how chaotic my desktop is because I have all these AI windows and open and like 12 different windows or 20 different windows. And so that's conveying the story that I do nothing but sit here and play with AI all day in a way without, it's like, tell me you are an AI expert
Yeah.
without telling me. And so,
Yeah. So to kind of to close out this discussion today, what has been the most impactful thing for you personally as a consultant as it relates to AI this year? Whether it's a tool that you're using, or just something that like really stands out as, wow, this has had a huge impact on my work.
uh, without a doubt, Notebook LM and the Google's Notebook LM, because, and fans of the show know I keep talking about it, and we did an episode where we got into the details of it, but I just love it so much. But I have to say, well, and um, like each of the models, so Gemini, Anthropic, and ChatGPT, each or Claude and Gemini, they all give different things. And very frequently, I will put the same prompt in all three if I don't get the response that I want. And I mean, that's that's one reason why I have 12 windows with each four tabs open at any given time because I'm constantly going back and forth. And where I would say it's helped me the most is in my research and the ability to pull documents and assess them quickly and summarize them quickly so I can build my own personal knowledge base. And that's where Notebook LM comes in super handy. And granted, again, I'm a researcher and a writer, so having the ability to pull these documents in and very quickly make sense of them. That's been my biggest win for AI and use of it. How about you? I'd be curious for you too.
So I think so I'm 42. In my lifetime, if you were to ask what's the most profound invention, hands down is OpenAI. I
Hmm,
don't even know how I lived without ChatGPT. So I don't even use Google search anymore. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. If I need something, I don't go to Google, I go to ChatGPT and I search it.
nice.
So I think the world of search is forever changed. And I think Google is going to have to quickly figure out their revenue model, and their revenue stream is heavily dependent on ads. And are folks going to continue to invest in ads if the new search is people directly searching in the AI tools themselves?
Yeah. I have to, yes. So I love that answer. And I have to flag that Google got caught asleep at, they were sleeping, and OpenAI came in and ate their lunch a couple years ago. But to be fair to Google, they've really stepped up, and Gemini is a really powerful product. And some of these tangential innovations like Notebook LM have really bolstered their position. I agree, their legacy search product might be in real trouble, but when I look up, when it comes to building agents, to me, Google's the most advanced and the simplest to do. And what I'm really hoping for is, and I'm convinced they'll announce it soon. I don't know, but I don't have any inside information, but is the ability to write an agent that then imports into or that connects into Notebook LM. So sort of opening Notebook LM up. I cannot wait for that, because like yesterday, I was using Gemini to uh, search for downloadable files in my research, and I had to it came back with the link, and then I clicked on the link and then downloaded it to my computer, and then I had to upload it to Notebook LM, and I was just like, oh, so close. I just want to be able to push it from one to the other, and I can see it, but it's not there
I think they need to get you in one of their focus groups.
yet. Exactly.
You've reached master user status.
But yeah, which is funny because I'd say I'm still pretty much a novice, and in so much of this, I'm just constantly learning because I'm old. And like I said at the beginning, I remember a time without computers or personal computers. So every day is a learning experience for me.
Yeah.
And I just want to like circle back to one other thing in terms of, I think the other area is having deep subject matter expertise. It is because the power of all these tools to augment deep expertise, I think, is a real winner. So it just sort of kind of thread the needle here at the end of, you can still be a consultant, but just general frameworks and knowledge arbitrage or labor arbitrage, we are way beyond that. So the question is can you be a deep expert and be proficient in all these AI tools? I think to me that's the winner going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. So my partner Paul is quite a bit older, and he technically can retire on June 8th. So
Wow.
he's not going to. He's gonna hold out a bit longer. But the reason I'm mentioning this is he is someone who I'm worried about what he's gonna do when he retires. And he never talks about it, seems to have no I'm, like, freaking out about it, and he's not, and I finally am like, "I just don't understand. I'm, like, worried sick about this, and you seem to, like, have no care in the world." He's like, "Sarah, I can always just consult if I get bored." And the reason is he has a very, very deep knowledge and expertise in something that is highly, highly sought after,
Mhm.
that will not be replaced by AI, but in conjunction with him using AI will be supercharged.
Yeah.
And he is a materials scientist with a specialty in high explosives. And so, to your point, that he's an example of somebody who I think using AI and having deep expertise in a subject matter there will be a need for people like him in consulting in the future.
No doubt. And I also think, which is an answer, is sort of training and upskilling. I think that's adjacent to consulting, but I do think for the next or for the foreseeable future, there will be work to be done in the training, which I always, again, I think it's adjacent. And so there is work to be done, lots of work to be done. It's just going to look a lot different than it has.
So I'll close us out. We sometimes give little gems on side hustle or new business ideas. I will say new business idea alert is building a practice up leveling consulting firms, and helping them learn the AI tools and incorporate them in their daily practices.
See, I'm not convinced that the legacy players, and this is Usman's point, that I'm not convinced they want that. And in fact, because the this is the sort of paradox that he talks about is that in the governance model, because you're in consulting firms, you're governed by the partners that own the firm. So the people that have to make these changes to bring somebody in like that to be the catalyst, they're the most invested in the status quo. And I think that this is what really caught my eye in one of his posts about private equity and venture capital. They're just saying, you know what, all those legacy firms are going to run out of gas, and when they do, we'll just come in and change the governance model or whatever it is. But on the short term, they're investing in these other alternative consulting models. And I just wonder if the I just and we've seen these firms shed a lot of jobs over the last year, and I fear that there's going to be a lot more, measured in the thousands or tens of thousands. It might be bleak for a little while.
Well, we'll have to circle back on that. My hope is that the younger generation in these consulting firms will step in and take over, before it's too late.
Yeah, and I know, just to end on a positive note, what I will say is, as somebody has seen generation after generation come into the workforce, in the consulting workforce, every sort of 5 years or so, the skills that the younger folks come in with are just light years ahead of the 5 years before. Because when I look at the folks of my generation, we watched people come through business school with with training in procurement and supply chain, and then training with that plus early analytics, and then eventually predictive modeling and advanced analytics. And now we're seeing them come in with AI training, like like just the new, like the skills at that level that have leveled up just before they even enter the building. It's truly phenomenal, and I'm actually very pleased to see it, because like I said, each generation comes in with vast amounts of more knowledge and skills that can be shaped.
Alrighty, I think that's the pod.
That's a wrap.